Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk. We are happy to be with you and happy to have our guest on. He is the executive director of the Dakota Medical Foundation, but he's on currently a leave from the foundation to work for the state of North Dakota. He is the interim commissioner of the North Dakota Department of Health and Human Services, appointed there by Governor Kelly Armstrong. And in that position, and there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. I mean, this is, if not the largest, one of the largest line items in North Dakota state budget for obvious reasons. Very, very tied into the federal government. There's a lot of things we can talk about that. There's been, I don't know what you want to call them, some speed bumps, some turbulence when it comes to federal funding. But the other thing we want to talk about is, as school has been starting here, the kids have been in for a couple weeks, few weeks now, depending on where you're at, and cell phones. And obviously the legislature passed a new law, really cracking down on cell phone use in schools, not just by the students, also the educators. And, I think people are trying to come to grips with it. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Mr. Traynor had some comments the other day, and I pushed back a little bit. I was a little bit critical of them. His comment was to an interim legislative committee was, our use of technology and devices is probably the largest public health threat that we have out there. And he continued, he said, we have a lot of health threats. We have chronic disease, we have cancer, we have, all sorts of other problems. But I think digital device use is perhaps the greatest challenge facing us all, because we are, as a society, completely dependent on these things, and we're excessively using them to the point of interfering with our daily activities of living. And I just wanted to have him come on and have a conversation about that. Pat, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Rob.
Expand on those comments a little bit. I should explain, I pushed back on them a little bit. I thought we have a lot of public health risks that I would rank far above digital use. And oh, by the way, Matt's reminding me, I should, you're going to hear another voice. Normally you would hear Chad Oban as the guest, as my co-host. But today we actually have a guest co-host, Kyler Collum. Chad's off today. Kyler is a columnist for the Dakotan, also does a podcast. They're very, very focused on Minot, but today he's going to be talking about some statewide stuff. So welcome, Kyler.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for not forgetting about me, and I appreciate coming on the show today to help out.
I forget stuff all the time. I get anxious. I want to get right into it with the guests.
Ready to go.
Yeah, my pushback was I thought that I think there's a lot of things going on in the world that I worry about more than device use. So I took your comments as a little over the top, but
Yep.
You're
Fair enough. That just to set the context for where I was when I made that comment, I was at a training that we hosted, and it's called the Battle for Our Attention. So I wasn't in front of a committee. I was really, and I had invited people to come. I mean, that were in that Doge committee that were reporters, and said, hey, you should just come to the training. And so I certainly said those comments, but it was in a training, called the Battle for Our Attention. So I just want you to know that.
Yeah. Got it.
And, it's a learning curve for me, Rob, on how to say what I'm saying. So I will be honest with you that, and I thought the article on balance was fabulous. And, there are tons of health threats facing us, chronic disease being number one for sure. If, you think about the essence of your life, let's just say Rob Port and Tyler, who are on today, and Pat, who's with you, and we're having a conversation. We don't know how much time we have, in this life, But we do know we have this gift called our creative energy, our imagination, our focus, our energy, the gifts that we develop, and that we discover over our lifetimes. Like you're a dad, being the greatest dad. If you're continuously distracted, in front of your kids or whatever, you're probably not going to meet the expectation that you have, because I know you're responsible and you want to be a great dad. So do I. And so this whole idea is to get us to have this conversation about, is our use of technology on the healthy side, in terms of use and overuse? And are we using it as a tool to help us become more extraordinary, to become more fulfilled, to improve our relationships with our kids, with our loved ones, with our friends, with our coworkers? Or is it becoming such that the usage is so high that it's distracting us from enjoying, the present moment that we're in? So our creative energy and the moment, like we're sharing a moment today. Life is simply a series of moments. And so whether you're with your coworkers, you're around the table and you're dreaming big dreams and figuring out how to help the health of the people of North Dakota, we need to be fully present and engaged with our discernment, our reflection, our creative capabilities, because, we all have these gifts. We all see the world a bit differently. And so we need to utilize these gifts that each and every one of us has. And so my argument is, and there's research behind it, isn't just my, position. It is that if they design these devices to be irresistible, which they are, and there's all sorts of science behind it. It's the age of the attention economy. These organizations are there to extract information about us and then use that information to use it in a commercial enterprise. I mean, so all the things to sell things online, et cetera, et cetera. So my point in bringing it up is that if we lose our ability to be present, we lose our creative potential. And life really, the enjoyment of life is really discovering, deploying our creative potential with each and every one of us, to be present in this conversation. And then the health things, I can go through. I kind of had a few statistics I'd like to share, but I can do it throughout the conversation. I don't want to monopolize, because I want to hear from Tyler too, when he raises his hand. But I got a bunch of statistics to kind of level set, that, like, what's the research tell us? There's all sorts of books out there. The two I would recommend, there's a really deep one. It's called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And I can't really pronounce her name, but I'll just show it to you. It's Shoshana Zuboff. And you can see how thick it is. It's dense reading, but it talks about how the whole economy has changed, and we are now an attention economy. It's very deep. I just want to I don't want to go through it with you. I just want to refer it to you. Then there's another one, that is pretty interesting. It's called Indistractable. So the thesis is, they've created these things to be so irresistible that many of us are in a potential or a perpetual state of distraction. Okay, because we're being, the economic model is to capture our attention. So that training where I made those statements was the battle for our attention training. And I'd love to someday go through it with you so you can kind of see what we're doing. I know we won't have time for that, but I'll give you a few stats. So 300 million people now, 95% of Americans, use a tablet, a wearable device, or a smartphone. Adults spend about 7 hours a day on these digital devices or screens, so screens like this or our digital devices. Teens spend about 9 hours a day, and that's entertainment media. And half of them in these surveys say we're on continuously. But use 9 hours just for sake of discussion. And so 7 hours with adults, 9 with children online. So I'm just going to do the math for you. 7 hours a day online, 49 hours a week, over 2,500 hours in a year. It's about 106 days in a year. So if you multiply that out, like if you're age 18, let's just say, and you multiply it out to age 80, you've spent over 18 years, on the internet, liking, swiping. They say we look at these devices 144 times a day on average, and then we swipe and scroll swipe up 2,500 times. We're checking it, we're doing something with it to engage with it. Now, remember, they created it to be that way. So back in my old role at Dakota Medical, we had a woman named Anna Lemke. She's a psychiatrist, Stanford. And she wrote the book Dopamine Nation. That'd be the only other book I'd tell you that perhaps you should read, but you could probably just listen to her on a YouTube and pretty much get her thesis is scientifically, we get a dopamine hit every time we hit like, swipe, we check our phone, the deal comes up on our email, text, whatever. So it's part of becoming an automatic thing with us. So we're experiencing this pull, this addiction to our devices. So I'll just give you a couple more. The average person receives 121 emails per day. They're reviewed within 6 seconds. Now, these are averages. These are averages, Rob, and Tyler. Average person receives 46 texts per day. 18 to 24-year-olds receive about 100, or it says 109. And these are just notes I took, so I'm just kind of giving you the overview. 95% of these texts are read within 3 minutes, but the average is 90 seconds, the average response time. So average person also receives 46 social media notifications a day. Young adults, though, they get over 200 plus. So the average response time to those is 3 minutes. So what I'm setting up is that we're constantly distracted, Rob, with these things if we leave these things on and in front of us. So I already gave you do you know that the average person scrolls about a mile a day? I mean, I was just floored when we learned this. But we had this Anna Lemke come out and give a talk to about 150 people in Fargo in August of 2023. So we were able to kind of put these things together, and how we got into it is a group that we had convened of mental health practitioners, and we said, what are the root causes to this? The number one thing that came up was this, the use of the smartphone. So here's just another stat for in the workplace. So in the workplace, this is just an average poll. They could have probably different polls, different times, but 2.5 hours is spent online, non-related to the work at hand. That's just an average, all across America. Okay, that's like a Gallup or one of those polls. Okay, so what's the number one worry is that we're losing our ability to think deeply, to focus, and concentrate. So I'm in the present moment with you. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not being distracted. I'm enjoying the time spent having a conversation. I will shut up so I can hear from you in just a moment. But here's one for you on college kids. So college kids can only focus on any one task for about 65 seconds. 65 seconds. In another study, office workers' average focus time was about 3 minutes. 3 minutes. So so some of these studies indicate that we can work in front of a digital device an average of 40 seconds before we're distracted or interrupted. Generally, these are notifications that come up, which in our training, we teach people to turn your notifications off when you really want to do deep work. Here's just a couple other mental health statistics. 60% of people in the United States today feel lonely. 40% of Americans have no best friends. And in 1990, 33% of Americans had 10 plus close friends. And by 2021, I'd like to get updated figures. That dropped to 13%.
Yeah.
So again, that kind of level sets where we are. Sorry to go on too long. I just wanted to give you sort of what formed the basis for that training that led to that statement, because I feel like it was important to share and have a meaningful discussion with you and Tyler today.
Yeah, for sure, Pat. You made some really great points in there, especially when it comes to distraction and being present for the job. One question I kind of have for you then, so past obviously getting awareness out there, which is a huge thing for you, and I think you're doing a great work with that. Do you have any plans to implement any actual workplace policies at the HHS with something like no phones in meetings, anything like that?
That's a great question. And so as we want to be one of the pillars that this administration wants to do is wants to pursue is the healthiest workplace in America being NDHHS. So that will certainly be one of the things that we plan to look at in terms of how are we using our devices as a tool, and how can we limit the distractions for when we're trying to be the best we can at being leaders, managers, and supervisors. So when we're holding meetings together, we're 100% in the moment of the meeting, which, everything we do should be connected up to being the healthiest state in the nation, but it has to start with us being a model, and we need to model the behavior for what it means to us. So I feel like they will be social norms rather than dictated rules. I want everyone to figure out, what does that mean to them within like if you're running a human service center in Fargo and you have a team of committed people to this, they have to talk through how would we put this into place. So we're using it as a tool. We're being family friendly because we want people to know that if they've got a sick kid at home, or if they need to tend to something that's super important, they should have their phone with them. And so we want to make sure we're having meaningful dialogues about what's a smart way to approach this in a team and a collaborative sense. Because remember, all this is new from, we're just learning about it. So we're all learning together.
Let me interject because I share some personal history. And it's actually funny that this conversation is happening on September 10th because 24 years ago today, I was sitting as a 21-year-old, was sitting in my living room on a dial-up modem before Facebook and Twitter existed. And spending inordinate amounts of time. I started a blog. And spent, I would work all day and then spend 5 or 6 hours a night working on this blog that ultimately led to my career. That was screen time. To this day, I probably, those statistics you read, I wish I only got 46 texts a day. I use my stuff inordinately. And what really worries me is that we seem to be talking about screen time as though it was this monolithic thing, as if there weren't different types of screen time. If somebody's spending 8 hours a day doom scrolling Facebook, I agree. That's unhealthy. But sometimes my son comes home from school and gets on his Chromebook that I'm able to monitor his screen time and everything, gets on his Chromebook, starts a Facebook Kids Messenger video chat with his friend who lives in a different place, and they spend a couple of hours working on a video game that they're building together. I don't look at that as equivalent screen time to the doom scrolling. I think that's very creative. I think that's very social. They're talking, they're laughing, they're building something, they're learning stuff. And I worry that what's going to get caught up in all this is just I worry that it's a bunch of old people, myself included, who are looking at the way the kids are socializing today and looking at the way they're creating today and seeing that it's not like how it was when we grew up and deciding that must be bad. Now, I agree. I mean, if you want to say all things in moderation, I get it. You got to get up. You got to move around. You can't live in the virtual world. You have to touch grass sometimes, as the internet's prone to say. But I worry that this is a moral panic. I'm looking at this, and I say it again. I was the video game generation. I was told that Grand Theft Auto and Doom were going to turn me into a sociopath, and it didn't happen. In fact, we saw one of the most precipitous declines in violent crime this country's ever seen. So I don't think that was because people were playing video games. I think that was probably some other factors, but the panic never arrived. Like the justification for the panic never arrived. So when I hear some of you throwing all these statistics, my mind just goes, here we go again. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, that's an intellectual dialogue we're having, and you're setting up a family structure that's quite solid. And, you have a core creative energy where you use digital devices as a tool. I mean, if you took the assessment, you're not in the problem state. There's just a simple assessment that we use that's not, it's just 14 or 15 questions. It's not like the multiphasic personality inventory or anything of the sort, but it just puts you like, how are you in relationship to your use, and is it helping you? The question with your device use, is it helping you become the you would like to be? Because that's your choice. Is it enhancing your ability to have relationships that you would like to have? And so those things that you mentioned about your son, those are great. That's a great use of technology. Technology is also a tool. So it's like fire. Fire is fabulous when you're having a campfire. No problem. You're roasting some more, you're doing marshmallows, you're doing s'mores, but fire can also burn down the house. So it's a useful thing. It's very useful. There's no panic relative to healthy use of technology. None whatsoever. In fact, we should encourage the use of technology where it's helping you advance you and who you want to be, your relationships, and what you're passionate about, your service to others, your work, your creativity.
Let me ask this follow-up question then, because the thing is the cell phones and Facebook and the tablets and the smartwatches, they're not going away. They're here to stay. But what we've done with this school policy, specifically in North Dakota, is we have said that for roughly 9 months a year, for the bulk of your waking time during the week, you're not allowed to have these devices. They have to be locked away somewhere. So I hear that, and I'm wondering, how do we teach kids how to have healthy relationships with their devices when we're just taking the devices away? Like, to me, that doesn't teach responsibility. That's just the device is bad. Not, I'm wondering, how are they going to come out of school, out of their childhood and into adult life with where these phones are going to exist? Will this policy have taught them how to have good relationships with these devices, or is it just prohibition?
So remember, there's 24 hours in a day, just from a standpoint of parents still control, the environment within which their kids grow up, values, norms. For instance, when you have a family meal together, are you present? And that goes for us, goes for me, with my kids and everything of the sort. But you're in charge of your family structure, as a parent, or with guardians and others that take care of children. So when we're in school, we're there to learn. So can we learn if the studies tell us that learning is impaired when you're in a constant distractive state? These things were designed to be irresistible. We didn't know that. We didn't know that at the time. So what I think they're understanding with this is that, look, these things, when used correctly and used as a tool, are fabulous inventions. They have more capabilities than the Apollo 11. I mean, this thing has more.
Under the current policy, what capacity do students have to use their phones as a tool during the school day?
Well, they certainly have device use because they're still having online curriculum. They still have those things. And so, as you know, this thing used to be a phone. This thing became a computer over time. I mean, this has the capabilities. I can pretty much do everything, from this device. So what they're learning is that it's like there were no guardrails, Rob, before. So what do we regulate with kids today? We regulate alcohol and drugs. We say you have to be a certain age before. Why? Because kids don't have the protective factors that we have based on years of experience. And so there's all sorts of history with parents making sure they're providing safe environments for their children. So providing a learning environment doesn't have to have a continuous distraction. And if you interview some people within schools, they'll start to show. I've interviewed people like in Fargo, and they're showing socialization. They're not buried in their phone like this. They're meeting with one another, developing social skills. They're bantering back and forth instead of doing this with half sentences and photos. They're learning what you and I are doing: discernment, dialogue, humor, joy, sharing tragedy together, being supportive, instead of being buried in their phone. Social skills are being stunted by this, and you can find a whole body of information and science behind that. And the deep thinking capabilities and creativity are being blunted by the addiction. Why? Because it's a distraction. It doesn't let us have these experiences. If life is a series of experiences, tell me what we're preventing, just in that 8 hours. I mean, we're trying to give them also socialization. How do I work with people? How do I play on the playground without a device? How do I do all these things so that we can experience the creativity that we were called to share with each other? And those are the formative years, the developing years. Jonathan Haidt would be the other book that it's called Anxious Kids. You probably already know all about it, but his website traces the teen. He can trace the teen mental health and the correlation, what happened when these phones were, which we didn't get any warning. I gave it to my kids early. We didn't know. I thought it was fun. I didn't know. Had I known the dangers with it, we probably wouldn't have experienced some of the things we experienced in our household. I'm not blaming it on just that, by the way. I think there's complex factors with everything. So know that this isn't a one item issue. I mean, if we get people healthy diet, healthy physical activity, I mean, those are awesome things for our health and well-being. So this, along a myriad of other things, are contributing factors to this teen mental health. But if you look at Haidt's slides, he goes through how it correlates directly with the advent of the smartphone and all these social media apps that people are on. And he cites, anxiety, depression, mental health problems going up in kids, more so with girls than boys. And so certainly there's studies correlating these things. So I do think it's where we need to start talking about it. I don't think we should be and have a panic. I think we should have meaningful discussions like we're having today.
And you make some great points with those mental health issues and aspects with it too. And I think you said something along the lines of we've upgraded phones in only so many years, but we haven't really upgraded humans yet. And we're in the stage now where these things aren't probably going away. And we have started to see some of these unknowns at the time when technology is created. We don't know what we don't know. We're finding out some of those implications and ramifications of it all. And now you look forward to the future. How do we start to develop and build a society where we can deal with these things a little bit better and start to maybe negate those mental health aspects while still without getting rid of the devices themselves at this stage?
Yeah, I think it's having meaningful discussions like this and ensuring that we're thoughtful and intentional in how we're addressing this, and making sure, that parents need to be aware, because ultimately parents are in charge of their children. And that's should be something that we preserve, in terms of who can have the greatest impact on a child, a parent or a caregiver, for sure. Teachers, in particular, coaches, mentors, friends, family, beyond that, but certainly the people we hang out with the most, we become the average of. I mean, that you can kind of show, how you get better when you hang around with better people. And so we want to make sure we're talking about, hey, what does this mean to you? And, Rob came up with a really good example about how his son is using it in a great way to promote relationships, creativity, all those things. And so that's fabulous. And those are the kinds of things we have to talk about. But the other one we need to talk about is just what's happening with society itself. Are we able to have these kind of discussions in a civil and kind manner, or is social media, being designed to be more outrageous and more polarizing and placing people at the extremes where they're not even viewing reality in such a way that we can have a meaningful debate and a dialogue? And that's kind of how social media has been designed, so that they're capturing more people's attention. But just back to North Dakota teens, you know, suicide is the second leading cause of death, teens, 10 to 19. It's a serious issue. If this is part of the discussion, we should be having it. That this is, obviously, there's studies out there that say that the correlation between excessive use and depressive thoughts, hopeless thoughts, has been made time and time again. So again, it's not the only one, but it's a serious issue that we all need to discuss. We all know someone or whose family has been impacted by suicide, including mine. So it's a serious issue that we need to discuss, but not in a moral panic type of a situation, but in a meaningful, reflective, exchange of ideas about what do we do with this.
Well, I think that's one thing I would really like to hear is an acknowledge, because I think there's just we're in a very scolding mode. Everybody's getting scolded about their
Yes.
screen. And I think it, first of all, it ignores some of the wonderful things that this connectivity has made possible.
Yes.
We're ignoring a lot of that, and we're treating all screen time like it's the same, and it's not. There are very productive, very good ways to do this that aren't shouting at your neighbor on Facebook because they didn't vote for the right person in the last election.
Yes.
There are positive things. One quick thing before we go, last question. I know we just have a couple minutes left with you. I wanted to ask, I know there's been some turbulence with federal funding flowing into the state. There's a lot of federal dollars in your department's budget. Have you guys seen delays? How is that going? I know we've heard some other places where there's been delays for funding. Yeah, we just heard recently the universities were in the headlines, worried about research dollars getting held up. Your department's a pretty vital one for our state. How are things going in terms of federal funding? Is there a lot of uncertainty, or what's going on?
Well, one thing I wanted to say, and I had a note about that just to remind myself to talk to you about today, is we have a real opportunity with one of them. While we do hear all the stuff that you're just saying, not necessarily, just a lot of change. But what I wanted to tell you about is with that big, beautiful bill, there's what's called the Rural Health Transformation Grants. And that would be, Rob, $100 million, and Tyler, $100 million a year for 5 years to enhance the rural delivery of healthcare, to prevent chronic disease, to maximize the use of technology. Those guidelines should be out, I think within days. So we'll know more then, but I know we have to put and so we've been doing listening and learning tours and sent out surveys to legislators, to providers, all across the state. And we've got over 900 responses, for ideas on what we could do to enhance care delivery and preserve the models of rural healthcare delivery. And then also hit and try to hit on preventing chronic disease and how do we deal with chronic disease? Because if you want to control costs, you're going to go after chronic disease and try to reduce people's suffering from chronic disease as best you can, and then to deal with it once they have it. So that's a real opportunity. And I did want to leave you with one positive thing. It's an opportunity of a lifetime, Rob, for this, for the rural area. So that's what I leave you with.
Well, we'll put a pin in it there, Pat. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Pat. It was a pleasure meeting you today.
Thank you.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Just finished up with Pat Traynor talking about, he kind of dodged that last question, Kyler, a little bit. I asked him about delays in funding. I feel like, and then he went off on a thing about the rural health grant, which I think is great. That's all to the positive, but I was kind of interested in seeing if any delays in federal funding. Nobody wants to talk about that. So
Of course, that's one of those touchy things. And, he wanted to end on the positive note, and he did, because that is a really cool thing what he was talking about there at the end. But I don't know if he ever specifically mentioned a time frame for any of that public or that federal funding coming down.
Yeah. And then also the just the whole issue, I think, and it's hard to talk about because I think it's kind of a matter of degree of our response, where on one hand, there really is a problem. I don't deny that there's a problem. We need to be better, or maybe think better, or adopt a different philosophy when it comes to our digital lives. And the problem, though, is I'm worried that we're in overcorrection mode, and that a lot of the people who are making the policy are by definition older people, and they're making policy for targeting younger people. And when that happens, I think moral panics happen. I think it's my son's childhood is looking very different from my childhood.
Yeah.
Because
For
he has
them.
that when I came home from school, from elementary school, I couldn't video call my friend. I had to ride my bike over to their house. And there's probably a lot of oldsters out there who are like, oh, well, that was good. That was healthy. You're going outside. You're interacting face to face. Well, the thing, though, is that I probably visited my friends less because I had to physically go over there, and that wasn't always possible. Maybe the weather was bad, or maybe my parents didn't want me out of the house. But, my son probably talks to his friends outside of school a lot more than I did because of digital. I look at that as generally a positive thing.
Exactly. Just the fact they're able to, even if it's not even a video call, just being able to text back and forth with each other and have those consistent conversations is, in a sense, a plus side. I mean, you want to be able to have that social face-to-face interaction ability, but at the same time, in the world we're going into, you need to know how to be able to successfully and competently interact digitally too.
Maybe it's the libertarian in me
Yeah.
that is taking a very sort of Darwinian view of this, but I think a lot of it's just evolution. I think it's evolution in the way that humans had to evolve from being agrarian based to city based. Most of us, we had to evolve during the Industrial Revolution. We had to evolve when the telephone came out. Obviously, social media has created some very difficult things in the way discourse, partisanship. I mean, we talk about these things all the time. But I think what's going to be the solution is not the government stepping in and regulating when we're allowed to use our devices. I think it's going to come from humans just evolving to adapt to this new reality. I think a lot of what's going on in politics is just going to take a certain generation of Americans who, sort of grew up believing everything they read in the newspaper, and now they believe everything they read on the internet. We're just going to need them to age out of the voting block for things to get back to normal. That sounds pretty grim, but that's kind of the place we're at. There's a lot of people who just, they get all their information from memes, and they think the funny meme must have it right. Why would somebody publish it if it wasn't correct? And they just believe it. And I think we have a generation of Americans coming up that aren't going to be quite so credulous.
Yeah. And I think you make a really good point with the evolution aspect of it. It's so much of this is trial and error. We didn't know when all of this started what we don't know. And now we are really figuring these things out on the go. And so much of it is just the fast-paced nature of this situation too, in comparison to a lot of those other past evolutions people have had to deal with.
Oh yeah,
Now,
they're happening faster now. And so it's harder for the evolution part to keep up. And that's fair. So it's really interesting.
Seeing where people go in the future is going to be really fascinating because this is such a, even still how fast it's evolved, it's still constantly evolving at a pretty quick rate. And I'm sure there will eventually become some kind of a plateau to this situation, but I don't think we're there yet.
I think 20, 30 years, we're going to look at some of the stuff we're doing right now around cell phones and think it looks pretty silly.
Yeah, because you mentioned prohibition at one point, and that's a very good way to put it, because just saying no, you can't do something and taking it away from people, it's a natural human instinct to want to try to go and do that at that point.
I think I think it would be harder, but I really think we're better off teaching kids how to use their phones responsibly and develop healthy habits around them than we are just taking them out for a very large chunk of the day. That I think that's probably the better approach.
Yeah. Like just working with kids, I know if you're able to reason with them a little bit instead of just saying do this, but telling them do this because of this, so often that makes a big difference in that situation.
Let's keep moving. I wrote a column in District 25, which the reorganization for the North Dakota Republican Party has been a wild ride.
That's 6 months. It's been a lot. It's been
the last several political cycles, but it's really been coming to a head. District 25, of course, is where Representative Cindy Schreiber-Beck, longtime Republican lawmaker, pretty moderate, very much a part of the traditional Republican centrist, whatever you want to call them, class. She was replaced by Kathy Scraw, who is very much a part of the populist, MAGA, whatever you want to call them, wing. That district certainly taken over by that faction of the Republican Party. But however you feel about Representative Scraw or the leadership in District 25 or what have you, something that was pretty interesting is that District 25. Now, if for people who don't know, when North Dakota law, when there's a vacancy in the legislature, it essentially gives the authority to fill that vacancy, whether it's because of a resignation or in this instance, Representative Schreiber Beck passed away. It gives the authority to fill that vacancy to the partisan district committee of the lawmaker who created the vacancy. So if it's a Republican who vacated the seat, then the local district Republicans get to pick. And increasingly, given some of the gamesmanship and that we've seen within the party, I'm very skeptical of this process. And in the District 25 process specifically, the district handed out a 18-question questionnaire, which is not inappropriate in and of itself. I asked them about things like term limits, describe your ability to raise funds to campaign. These are not unreasonable questions. But one of them was, what church do you attend? And how do you serve your church family? And I had a big problem with that, Kyler. Not because, personally, I'm not a spiritual person. I don't worship. I'm an atheist, I guess is the right word for it. But I'm generally agnostic when it comes to however people want to worship. Like, it just doesn't bother me. But I think our government should be neutral. And certainly when an organization like the Republican Party is given the awesome responsibility to replace somebody in a public office, they have to be neutral when it comes to religion. And that questionnaire was not neutral.
Yeah, no, you make a great point with that. And I think largely we're on the same boat in that situation. I know one other side of this argument that they're going to come back and push back is saying, hey, the local people of this district are the ones that have stepped up and have came to these meetings and have came to the forefront of the district party and have gotten into those leadership positions for a reason, because they worked for it. And that control should be deemed necessary and at the level of those people. However, when you start looking at situations nationally, when it comes to, even like in your article, you cited a couple of the places in the Constitution where it's talking about, no religious litmus test for public office. And then, you made the argument, hey, this is, maybe people will say that this is a nationally only thing and states shouldn't be up for it. Well, back in 1961, there was a Supreme Court precedent set that argued that against that, and that states should be responsible for those same principles.
And even just from a moral perspective, if you are somebody who wants to serve an elected office and you put in an application for this, and now they're asking you, let's say you're a Muslim or you're Jewish or you're Hindu or something, and your place of worship's not called a church. And by the way, elsewhere in the questionnaire, they were telling they had this whole thing in there. I kind of laughed when I read it. They said that, your answers are going to be shared with the District 25 committee and the executive committee. Understand that it's possible that some of your answers may be leaked to the press. To a hostile party. Whoops. I felt very seen in that part. If this happens, anything you write may be used against you, the D25 GOP or the ND GOP in a future situation. And then it tells them to refer to Matthew 10:16. And so I don't know, like if you're Jewish or you're Muslim or you're atheist or whatever flavor of religious belief or lack thereof you are, and you're reading that, it kind of feels like Christians need not apply.
Yeah, no, you make a great point. There's two things that can be simultaneously true with this. One, America was largely found on Christian principles. Two, America was also founded on religious freedom to practice anything anyone really wants. And to try to go in and, I'm not going to say force, but to effectively say two people have the exact same qualifications and credentials, but one refuses to fill out that section versus another who talks about their intense commitment to their local church, and they end up picking that person over the former, all of a sudden now you have questions raised about that religious kind of intent.
You can't ask the question about religion without admitting that you're considering their religion when making the appointment, and you can't consider their religion. It's unconstitutional, and frankly, I think it's immoral.
Yeah.
Now if they want to offer that and say, if you ask about, well, describe your civic engagement, and they say, well, I attend church and I volunteer at my church's food pantry and I do this and that with my church. That's great.
That's fair.
But the problem is you're asking specifically, what church do you go to? And if you say, well, I don't go to church, I mean,
And-
the implication here, they're not going to react positively to that.
And also, even if, say, they were to frame it in the sense of where do you worship your religion at, even that's going to be a little bit leading, because you're going to open up the possibility. It might be a little bit more fair on the surface, but you're still opening up the possibility for someone to give you an answer you don't like.
I used to think it was fine that these local executive committees or the local district committees appointed for replacements. We've had a lot of vacancies over the last year, and we've had some deaths, some resignations. And I am really struggling with whether this process is adequate for the responsibility. Because again, we're not. And by the way, this questionnaire would be different if we were talking about the district committee evaluating somebody for the nomination. If the North Dakota Republican Party only wants to endorse Christians I don't think that's wise, and that's certainly not the policy that I would advise. But that would be a private organization. So if they want to do that for their candidates, for their endorsement, that's fine. But that's not what this was.
No.
They are appointing somebody to hold a public office that belongs to everybody in District 25, whatever their religious beliefs.
And they now become an incumbent on the ballot next year, which adds a whole level of
There's advantages to being the incumbent.
Yeah.
So that's, but I mean, the thing is, you're going to hold that office. These public offices are sacred.
Yeah.
It's the public trust, and it belongs to everyone in the public, whether you go to church or not, or whether you're Christian or not, or anything else.
Mm-hmm. And you made a great point. Like, obviously it is the prerogative or the right of that party locally to say, hey, if you don't have X kind of Christian values, we're not going to nominate you. But this isn't just that appointment to the nomination. This is the appointment to the seat in the House at this stage. Obviously, we're in an off-cycle point right now, but there's still interim committee meetings going on and things of that nature. And they have the District 25 will be up for election next year.
Yeah, that's right. Do you think that we need to change this part of law? I feel like that we could fill these vacancies a different way. North Dakota is kind of unusual in allowing the political party to do it. I think maybe we need a partisan neutral way to do it.
I fully agree with that. I would love to see how that would be set up in the state, especially
special elections are expensive, but you need a way. I mean, I do think you need a way to protect the fact, to protect the process and make sure it's representative of the peoples. But special elections are kind of expensive to put people through.
Minot knows about that this year.
Yes. So I don't know. I worry about that, and I worry that, I mean, when I look at the North Dakota Republican Party, I don't see them. I mean, even in a state as Republican as North Dakota is, I don't know that the current leadership of the North Dakota Republican Party represents all that large a cross section of North Dakota voters.
Yep.
Not when their first action under their new leadership is censuring our very popularly elected governor.
Yeah, that was a really interesting play when they did that, because at this stage too, post the cycle ending, like it's not going to do anything. It's just a ploy to get their point out there.
Well, the governor responded to it when I reached him for comment right after they did it. He told me, I don't care.
Yeah.
And a couple of weeks ago, we got a statewide survey, of his approval. He's the most popular elected leader in the state, even more popular than Donald Trump. And it's kind of clear that the voters don't care about the censures either.
No. And it's really weird to see that big of a gap, because he is, by and large, regardless of opinion on the property tax or anything like that, he's an incredibly popular governor right now. He's nearing 70% approval ratings. And to see him be at odds with his own party that is incredibly dominating in this state, that on top of that is, again, fairly popular to their own constituents, and just see them being at such odds, it's a really strange and unique thing to watch go on right now.
It really is. And I don't know. I mean, some of it there's just infighting in the party.
Yeah,
I understand that, but a lot of these processes are broken, and you got to remember, people who are a district chair, people who fill those district committee slots, even the people who are statewide leaders in the North Dakota Republican Party, the amount of votes they get to hold those positions are very small. I mean, these are quintessential smoky back room. I mean, they're small rooms. of party. I don't know if you want to call them elites, because most of these are pretty accessible. But when I read around the state too about how many districts are blocking certain people from being members, or coming up with membership rules that stop. Up in District 42, we have another Representative Emily O'Brien step down and to take a position at the Department of Health and Human Services, by the way.
We should have asked Pat about them, because there's a little questionability.
Full circle back to our first. I feel like his answer to that would have been, "Oh, she's great." Yeah, but Representative and Representative, I like Representative O'Brien. She's great. But she left the vacancy, and now there's a food fight where you have some members of that local committee like threatening lawsuits. And one of their complaints is that the current district chair, Kimmy Efta, disenfranchised existing voting district members by allowing new people to pay their dues and vote. Now, the district's bylaws allow people to, once you're a dues paying member of the district, you're allowed to vote on district business. There's no timeline there in the bylaws. So she's following the rules. You pay your dues, you get to participate. And they're upset about that. They said it disenfranchises. And I was floored by that. Like, can you imagine, like, hey, if we're letting new people into our club, it dilutes my vote. How just like fundamentally anti-democratic that is.
But yet, exactly. And yet you want to try and be as public and as you can be as promoting this big open tent that gets as many people in as it can.
Well, that's kind of a strange position, because yes, traditionally political movements win by addition, not subtraction. But the North Dakota Republican Party has become so large and so dominant in the state that, the attitude is, well, we have too many people in the tent. We need to push some people out of the tent.
Yeah.
And, and maybe it's hard. It's hard to hold a coalition that large together, because there are undoubtedly a very broad spectrum of ideologies or beliefs or what have you, philosophies that are under the NDGOP tent. Some people don't like the big tent, but
exactly. And that tent has been expanding for the last, at least 25, if not 30, 35 years at this point, since Ed Schaefer was elected governor in the early 90s. And then you go into like the Tea Party about 15 years ago was when it really started to take off into where it's starting to get to now. And it's now they're starting to almost hit the reverse button and you're seeing it nationally too. But it's North Dakota is such a microcosm of the whole event where it's at such an accentuated level. It's really fascinating to watch play out in real time.
Yeah. And I don't know what the end game is. This cycle is going to be very interesting, where you have a political party that is led by people who don't like a lot of our statewide elected Republicans very much. You look at the current chair, Matthew Simon of the NDGOP. He campaigned against Doug Burgum multiple times. Endorsed independent candidates against Republican. He was kind of a nobody on Facebook at the time, but he was supporting independent candidates against Republican candidates previously. He very much represents, a fringe. He supported Rick Becker over Julie Fedorchak, despite the fact that Fedorchak won the nomination in June. He continued to support Becker in the 2022 cycle. Even though Becker lost to John Hoeven too.
Sure. Then ran as an independent that fall. Yep.
And then ran as an independent. So, he doesn't like a lot of our statewide elected officials, including some. John Hoeven's never lost an election in the state.
2022 was the closest it's been, and he still had almost 60% of the vote.
Right. So I don't understand, how that dynamic is going to work, where you have a Republican Party that is, it's some of our statewide Republican candidates, like the Republican Party is not going to be very helpful to them. And I'm interested in how much money they're actually going to be able to raise now that they've sort of, coming out swinging against your governor is not a good way to, get help from the candidates. And candidates like Armstrong, candidates like Fedorchak and Hoeven and Kramer and the rest of them, they don't need the party.
No, they are big, especially like Hoeven and Armstrong and Kramer at this point. They have been around as party leaders for, in Hoeven's case and Kramer's case, decades. And Armstrong was the Senate majority leader back before he was elected to the House of Representatives in 2018.
No, he wasn't ever the Senate majority.
He wasn't? Oh, excuse me on that.
But he was the party chair for a while.
That's right. He was the GOP chair. Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. It's a very interesting set of circumstances. And this, I don't know what's going to happen with this District 25 thing. I don't know what's going to happen in District 42 where they're threatening lawsuits. I have a feeling that those lawsuits probably aren't going to survive. My review of Chair EFTA's actions in that committee juxtaposed with state law and the party bylaws. I just don't see. I don't see where they're going to have standing, or they'll probably have standing. I don't see where they're going to have success with a lawsuit.
Like, it probably won't get just immediately thrown out, but I doubt it'll end up going anywhere at that point too.
Yeah. All right. We are going to put a pin in it there. Coming up on Friday, we are going to have an interview with House Minority Leader Zach Ista. Now, I had a column a little while back about Democrats and maybe not talking about the things that voters think are important. And Representative Ista had some thoughts about that and reached out, wanted to come on the show. So happy to accommodate him. Kyler will be sitting in again also for the Friday show for Chad. And Chad will be back next week. And then the week after that, I'm actually taking the whole week off because my daughter's getting married.
Hey, congratulations.
And so Dad took the whole week off so I could be available for assignments.
Whatever Dad is deemed necessary to do will be done that week.
Exactly. So thanks as always for listening. Remember, you can always catch us on social media. We are Plain Talk ND on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, X. Also, call in, leave us voicemail. You can send us text if you want to react to the show. 701-587-3141. Call, leave your voicemail, leave a text anytime. You don't want us to use your name, that's fine. We value your input, though, so that's a really great way. Of course, leave us ratings and reviews wherever you're listening to the podcast. It's on YouTube. Give us a like. It's on Spotify or something. Give us a rating if you haven't already. Really appreciate that. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host, Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. You can't live in the virtual world. You have to touch grass sometimes.